The island of Arran on Scotland's west coast was chosen by the Glasgow University team for research work as it combined most of the factors of climate and geography to be found in the majority of tick-infested areas of the country. Of Scotland's total sheep population of nearly 8 million head, more than 5 million live in hill and upland areas infested with sheep tick. The majority of adult sheep have acquired an immunity to tick-borne diseases, but the greatest danger is to the lamb crop and to sheep introduced to the area from outside. Louping ill can prove fatal, but the most common infection is tick-borne fever, and the pyemic condition which can follow infection can lead to arthritis or abscesses. So is it possible to gauge just how great a problem the tick is to the sheep industry?
This has been discussed a lot, and the general conclusion is that nobody knows. The trouble is that basically that sheep come back from the hill to be marked or dozed or whatever, and many lambs anyway are crippled. And these are clearly cases of so-called tick pyemia. But there are other cases of tick pyemia where they're not necessarily crippled, they're just poor-doing lambs, wasters. And unless you actually opened these up and did a proper post-mortem, you couldn't tell whether it was tick pyemia or not. So the real incidence is unknown, generally regarded to be something of the order on hill sheep farms of about 5%. But it can go up to 20%.
Tick disease still takes its toll at Machrie, but research tests with a new antibiotic have brought encouraging results, with lamb losses, at least on this farm, reduced to levels well below what Donald McNiven was once forced to endure during his 25 years on the island.
Well, 1 year in that front field there in front of the house, I had between 30 and 40 lambs. And they're crippled and some ill-thriving, apparently with some trouble or another due to the tick problem. And of these, about only 17 of them survived.
That must be pretty heartbreaking for a farmer who depends on such a large proportion of his income coming from hill sheep.
Oh yes, I think so. I would say so. And the ravages of the and the troubles caused by the disease are really one thing I'm very grateful to the Professor Urquhart and his team for undertaking, because it has highlighted the problems and the labor and including the loss sustained by a tick-infested farm.
The antibiotic being tested by Professor Urquhart and his team may have been produced in the laboratory, but its effectiveness has to be assessed in the field, and careful weight records need to be kept of all treated lambs as they progress from birth to weaning.
B5. B5.
41.
41, no. Eh? I just wonder if that is two big tick marks. Oh, yeah. It's got sort of...
It's got some ticks on it. Wee ticks.
Yeah, there's two there, and there's some blood drips about. The project started as a rather more scientific project. I don't know whether you know, but what the tick does when it feeds is it inoculates a little bacterial microorganism called a rickettsia into the sheep. And this is the agent that causes what's called tick-borne fever. This rickettsia multiplies in the white cells of the blood and produces fever and loss of appetite and dullness for a few days. Now this itself I don't think is perhaps not wildly important, but during these few days when it's fevered, its white cells in the blood drop, and the animal's resistance to bacterial infection is very much reduced. And it seems to be during this period of when it's suffering, this short period when it's suffering from tick-borne fever, that this skin bacteria, these staphylococci, in some way get into the tissues and multiply wildly, producing abscesses all over the body. It's also interesting that when they're in this fevered state, they're extremely susceptible to louping ill virus. Louping ill, if this is inoculated by ticks at the same time, and they're also, and this has recently been shown to be proven, that they're also very susceptible to a Pasteurella infection, which is a very common cause of death in young lambs. And any hill sheep farmer with deaths in his lambs from pasteurellosis, one of the factors he'd now have to reckon is it the fact they've got tick-borne fever that has predisposed them to this condition?
Hillcrest Farm, like Macquarie, is typical of many Arran farms, with less than 30 sucklers and 300 blackfaces on 900 acres of mostly hill ground. Farms like this provide a basic living for livestock producers who, over the years, have seen a meagre income depleted still further by tick disease. At Hillcrest, John Anderson is no exception and claims his share of heavy losses in young lambs during the 28 years he has farmed on the island. In the trial, lambs have been given the antibiotic at 3 to 4 weeks of age, usually in groups of 50, with growth records then compared with 50 lambs which have not been injected. But despite the early promise of the antibiotic, traditional control methods are still advised.
The conventional way of dealing with tick-borne diseases is to dip sheep. But the problem with dips in young lambs is that they only give protection for up to, say, 2 weeks because of the rapidly growing fleece. So within 2 weeks, the animal is susceptible to tick bites again. And what we thought using this long-acting antibiotic was, first of all, we know from experiments that it will protect a lamb against tick-borne fever for 3 weeks. And we know it also will kill the staphylococci, not necessarily for 3 weeks, but for some time. And these two twin benefits seem to worth studying in the field.
But what of the argument by some farmers that dipping can often destroy natural smells and cause mismothering, particularly when large numbers are dipped?
I don't think this is so common as it does happen, but it's a relatively unusual phenomenon, I think, provided you take care to do them in small groups and make sure the lambs meet their mothers again before they're turned onto the hill.
In general terms, do you think our dips are good enough?
The best we've got, let's put it that way, within the regulations at the present time. I think, for instance, in parts of Africa, people are quite accustomed to dipping sheep or cattle twice a week to stop tick-borne diseases. And I think we perhaps have no right to expect we can get away with tick-borne disease by dipping once a year.
So you're really saying that perhaps better management could be one of the keys, better management on the part of our farmers?
Well, not necessarily as far as increased dipping goes. I think no one has ever really looked at constant, repetitive dipping, say on a monthly basis, as a means of knocking out ticks in this country. It's probably not economic. I think management does play a role, primarily in the sense of two things, I think. Surveillance, keeping an eye on the sheep. Generally, these problems are worse where sheep are not seen for several weeks on end. And decent nutrition is obviously the other thing. If you can hold them in by fields of good lower ground before they're turned out onto the tick-infested hill, they usually do much better.
Where abscesses form in joints as a result of tick disease, severe crippling may occur, and abscesses in other vital organs usually lead to unthrifty lambs. Accurate identification is only possible by a post-mortem, where the only exterior clue the farmer can see for himself is a badly swollen joint, a telltale symptom of tick-borne disease.
It's very typical indeed, Arthur. It's the way in which most farmers recognise tick pyemia, because it's a very easily recognised clinical sign when sheep come back limping, crippled. And although the abscesses, as well as being in the joints, can be anywhere in the body, this is very much most easily recognised.
Results from this year's trial work on 1,400 lambs have just been analysed by Professor Urquhart. The conclusions are highly encouraging, with the normal death rate from tick pyemia greatly reduced on hill farms. The next step is likely to be a move by the makers of the antibiotic to bring their product into wider use. And at an estimated 30 to 40 pence a dose, it could mean cheap insurance for thousands of livestock farmers throughout the world.
35.